Welcome to Coco Tales Reddit, where the quietest moments sometimes hide the loudest truths. Have you ever been so comfortable with someone, so wrapped up in the warmth of what you think is love, that your own intuition just goes to sleep? It's that feeling of sharing a quiet Sunday morning, coffee in hand, scrolling through your phones side by side, believing the person next to you holds your whole heart. You plan futures based on whispered promises in the dark, and you build a home not just with bricks and mortar, but with shared laughter and inside jokes. But what happens when you find out that for one of you, it was all just a script? My name is Andrew, I'm 32 years old, and until a few days ago, I genuinely believed I was one of the lucky ones. You hear stories, right? You see the dramatic posts and the chaotic reality shows, and you think to yourself, those poor people. You figure they must be prone to drama, or maybe just incredibly unlucky. I always counted myself in a different category. The guy who had his life together, the guy who found his person. Turns out, I was just the latter kind of person in that equation, catastrophically unlucky. 3 days ago, my life was perfect. Or, at least, the version of it I was living in was. I was in my home office, a space I love. The house itself was a gift, in a way. It was my grandmother's, a place filled with good memories, and it was fully paid off mine and mine alone. I was reviewing some work contracts, feeling that quiet satisfaction of a productive afternoon. The sun was coming through the window. I had a coffee getting cold on my desk, and I was 4 months away from marrying the woman I loved. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from Kimberly, my fiancée of 2 years. I smiled when I saw her name. I figured it was a picture of a dress or a question about dinner. I opened it without a second thought, and then the world stopped. The words on the screen didn't make sense at first. They were meant for someone else, that much was obvious. But they were about me. Girl, he's so clueless. Alo, just in a few days, I will get him to put my name on the house. Then, after the wedding, I'll have access to everything. The prenup talk hasn't even come up because he trusts me completely. This is almost too easy. I stared at the screen for what felt like a lifetime, but was probably only 30 seconds. Every word was a hammer blow. Clueless. Access to everything. Too easy. The phrases echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of my office. This wasn't my Kimberly. My Kimberly was the woman who cried during sad movies. The woman who made me soup when I was sick. The woman I was building a future with. This person in the text was a predator. Just as my mind started to spin out, trying to find any other explanation, another text buzzed through. It was her again. Sorry, babe, wrong person. Just joking around with Ashley about some reality show we're watching. And that's what sealed it. The excuse was so flimsy, so insulting in its lack of effort. Here's the thing about Kimberly. I had always thought she was a terrible liar. Whenever she'd try to fib about something small, like finishing the ice cream, she'd get flustered and her cheeks would turn pink. But this wasn't that. This wasn't a mistake born of panic. It was a mistake born of pure, unadulterated arrogance. She had gotten so comfortable in the con, so certain that I was a complete and utter fool, a mark that she'd gotten sloppy. She didn't even respect me enough to come up with a believable lie. A reality show? It was then I realized that for the last 2 years, I hadn't been in a relationship. I'd been a project, a target. My blood didn't boil. It turned to ice. The warmth I felt just a minute earlier vanished, replaced by a clarity that was terrifying and absolute. Every memory from the past 2 years began to flicker through my mind, but now they were all tainted. Every I love you, every shared dream. Was it all part of the act? The recent conversations about the house certainly clicked into place. She'd been pushing, talking about wanting to feel more secure, and how since we were getting married, it only made sense to put her name on the deed. And God, the worst part? I'd actually been considering it. Love really does make you stupid. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness or rage. It was adrenaline. My mind, which had been a swirl of confusion, suddenly snapped into focus. There was no room for heartbreak yet. That would come later. Right now, it was about survival. With a strange sense of calm detachment, I held my phone and took a screenshot of the first text. Then I took another screenshot of the second text, her pathetic attempt at a cover-up. I saved them, backed them up. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was going to need them. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the yard we were supposed to have barbecues in with our future kids. It all felt like a movie set now, a beautiful, elaborate fake. She hadn't just planned to use me, she was planning to ruin me, to take everything my family had worked for, everything I held dear, and she was gloating about how easy it was. So, what do you do when your life implodes via text message? You don't scream. You don't cry. You don't text back. You do what any rational person would do when they discover a viper in their home. I pulled up my contacts, my thumb hovering over her name for just a second before scrolling past it. I found the number I needed. I took a deep breath, straightened my back, and made the most important call of my life. The phone rang twice before he picked up. "Paul, it's Andrew," I said, my voice eerily steady. "Hey, Paul, hypothetical question." Paul laughed on the other end of the line, a rich, booming sound that usually made me feel better. "That's not very hypothetical, is it, Andrew? What happened?" His tone was light, but he's known me long enough to hear the ice in my voice. There was no point in pretending. The time for pretending would come later tonight, and I needed to save all my energy for that. "I'm sending you something," I said, my fingers already moving to forward the screenshots. "Check your email in about 10 seconds. I held the phone to my ear, listening to the silence as he opened the files. The silence stretched. It was longer than 30 seconds this time. It was a heavy, loaded silence, the kind where you can practically hear someone else's brain working, the gears shifting from casual chat to high alert. I could picture him in his office, leaning forward, his glasses slipping down his nose as he read and reread the words. "Okay," he said finally. His voice completely changed. All the humor was gone, replaced by the sharp, focused tone of the lawyer I paid him to be. "Here's what we're going to do." He had me come to his office right away. Walking out of my house felt strange, like I was a visitor in my own life. Every object I looked at a photo of Kimberly and me on the mantel. The jacket she left on the chair seemed like a prop in a play I never knew I was acting in. The 18 months she'd lived with me had woven her into the fabric of my home, and now I had to figure out how to pull all those threads out without unraveling completely. In Paul's office, surrounded by law books and the faint smell of paper, reality began to solidify into a plan. "Here's the crucial mistake she made," Paul explained, tapping a pen on his desk. "She's not a tenant. She pays no rent. She has no lease. Nothing is in her name. In our state, that makes her a licensee at will. It's like you gave her a long-term guest pass, and a guest pass can be revoked." He leaned back, a grim smile on his face. "That means you can revoke her license to be there with reasonable notice. And Andrew, we are going to make it very, very reasonable and very, very fast." For the next 2 hours, we mapped out what he called D-Day. It was a step-by-step, minute-by-minute plan to surgically remove her from my life. It involved locksmiths, movers, and formal notices. It was cold. It was brutal. And it was exactly what I needed. The heartbreak was a storm raging somewhere off the coast. But in this room, there was only the calm, calculated precision of the plan. It gave me a purpose beyond the pain. The hardest part, by far, was going home that night. I had to walk back into that house and act normal. I had to pretend that I hadn't just spent the afternoon plotting the eviction of the woman I was supposed to marry. She was on the couch when I walked in, watching some mindless television show like she hadn't just torpedoed our entire existence a few hours earlier. She smiled, that same beautiful smile that had once made my heart skip a beat. Now, it just looked like a mask. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" she asked, her voice light and happy. "Pretty good," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I went to the fridge and grabbed a beer, my hand steady, which surprised me. Productive. She patted the couch cushion next to her, an invitation into her world of lies. I sat down, the fabric of the sofa feeling alien. I tried not to think about how many times we had sat just like this. How many of those times had been real? Had any of them? The question was a bottomless pit, and I couldn't afford to fall in. Not yet. Then, as if on cue, she made her move. She started playing with my hand, her touch sending a jolt of revulsion through me that I had to fight to hide. "So, I was thinking," she began, her voice soft and persuasive. "Since the wedding's coming up so fast, maybe we should finally look into adding my name to the house. You know, just for security. What if something happens to you?" There it was. The setup. The exact play she had outlined in her text to her friend. The audacity was breathtaking. She was sitting here, holding my hand, looking me in the eye and laying the trap she'd already bragged about. The only difference was, now I could see all the wires. I forced myself to meet her gaze. I let a moment pass, as if I was actually considering it. "Yeah, maybe," I said, my voice a masterpiece of nonchalance. "Let me think about it." Her face lit up with a triumphant beam. It was the most genuine expression I'd seen from her all day, and it was because she thought her con was working. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. "You're the best," she whispered. Later, when she mentioned her friend Ashley wanted to go dress shopping over the weekend, I just nodded. "Of course," I said, feeling like I was floating outside my own body, watching a stranger perform these lines. That night, I told her I was sleeping in the guest room. "I think I'm coming down with something," I said, forcing a cough. "Don't want to get you sick before your shopping trip." She bought it completely. Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? In her story, I was the clueless Mark, the trusting fool who was just days away from signing over his future. She had no idea that as she drifted off to sleep in our bed, I was lying awake in a separate room, staring at the ceiling and counting down the hours until morning. The night was long, every tick of the clock a countdown to justice. The plan was in motion, the trap was set, and tomorrow, the clueless Mark was going to bite back. I didn't sleep much that night in the guest room. It wasn't a night for rest. It was a night for resolve. When the first gray light of dawn filtered through the blinds, I was already up and dressed. I left the house before she was even awake, a quiet ghost slipping out of a life that was no longer mine. My first stop was Paul's office to sign the final papers. The day was a blur of coordination after that, a series of moves on a chessboard that only Paul and I could see. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked into our shared bank. As a joint owner on the account, I exercised my right to withdraw every single dollar. I watched the teller count out the money, my face impassive. It wasn't about greed. It was about survival. This was the money she was planning to have access to. and I was simply closing the door before she could walk through it. I deposited it into a new account in my name only, the first official severing of our ties. At noon sharp, the locksmith arrived at my house. The sound of his drill biting into the front door lock was one of the most satisfying sounds I have ever heard. It was the sound of my safety being restored, a definitive, physical barrier being placed between me and the woman who had turned my home into a hunting ground. One by one, every lock was changed. At 12:30 p.m., with the new keys heavy in my pocket, I took the formal notice to quit that Paul had drafted and taped it securely to the front door. The legal language was cold and impersonal, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos swirling inside me. It was official. This was no longer her home. At 1 p.m., the movers Paul had arranged pulled up to the curb. They were efficient and professional. I pointed them to her things, and they began to pack. Watching them was a surreal experience. They boxed up the clothes she'd worn on our first date, the books she'd read on our couch, the little trinkets she'd collected. For a moment, a wave of sadness washed over me. This was the tangible evidence of a life I had believed in, and it was all being put into cardboard boxes. But then I remembered the text. He's so clueless. The sadness receded, replaced again by that cold, hard resolve. By 4 p.m., everything she owned was packed, loaded, and transported to a storage unit on the other side of town. I paid for the first month. It was more than the law required, but I wanted to be able to say I had been fair. I wasn't a monster. I was just a man who had woken up. Then I waited. The house was silent. Cleaner, emptier. I sat on my couch, and watched the clock. 5 p.m. came and went. 5:30. My heart was pounding, a slow, heavy drumbeat in the quiet house. At 5:47 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was her. The text was so casual, so Kimberly, it was almost funny. "Hey, babe! Door won't open. Think the lock's broken?" I took a breath. My fingers felt steady as I typed my reply. Checked the notice on the door. Silence. For 3 full minutes, there was nothing. I can only imagine the scene on my front porch. Her seeing the paper, her confusion turning to disbelief, her eyes scanning the legal jargon until the reality of the words finally sank in. And then, my phone exploded. It started ringing, a frantic, incessant shrieking. Her picture, the one of us smiling on vacation, flashed on the screen. I ignored it. It rang again. And again. 17 missed calls in 5 minutes. The storm had made landfall. I let them all go to voicemail. I would not give her the satisfaction of hearing my voice. Finally, a string of texts came through, littered with typos from her frantic fingers. "What the hell is this? A notice to quit? Are you insane?" I waited a moment before replying, my words calm and deliberate. "Your belongings are at Secure Store on Maple, Unit 47. First month is paid. Your car keys are in the lockbox by the garage. Code is 4567. Her next text was a plea, a switch in tactics. "Andrew, please, whatever you think happened, we can talk about this. You can't just throw me out. I live here." That was the line that I couldn't let stand. It was the heart of her entire delusion. "No," I texted back. "You stayed here. Big difference. Paul says you have 24 hours to collect your personal effects before access is rescinded." She tried calling again, twice. I declined both times. Then, I typed out the final message. "Only contact me through my lawyer. His number is on the notice." And with a final, liberating tap on the screen, I blocked her number. I blocked her on everything. The digital ghost that had haunted my phone for 2 years was finally exorcised. I leaned back, the silence of the house no longer feeling empty, but peaceful. It was over, or so I thought. I had cut off her access to me, but I had no idea what she was about to do on my front porch. And thankfully, my new doorbell camera was recording everything. Blocking her number brought a wave of profound, satisfying peace. For a moment, I allowed myself to breathe it in. But peace is a luxury when you're dealing with someone like Kimberly. My new doorbell camera, the one with the surprisingly clear audio, had been recording this whole time. A notification on my phone told me there was a lot of activity at my front door. I couldn't resist. I had to see it. The footage was something else. It was like watching a one-woman show about the 5 stages of grief, but for getting caught. First, there was denial and confusion as she stared at the notice. Then came the frantic, tearful phone calls to me. When I didn't answer, the tears turned to pure, unadulterated rage. She started screaming, her face contorted into a mask of fury I had never seen before. She actually tried to break in through the back door, but the new alarm system I'd had installed blared to life, sending her scurrying back to the front porch like a startled raccoon. Defeated, she slumped down on the front steps and did what she did best. She called for backup. And the best part? She put her friend Ashley on speaker, just a few feet from my new camera. "He knows!" Kimberly sobbed into the phone, her voice raw and panicked. "I don't know how, but he knows. He changed the locks. Everything's in storage. What do I do?" And then came the response from Ashley. A line so dripping with scorn and frustrated greed, it was almost poetic. It was the confirmation I needed, but didn't even know I wanted. "I told you not to text about it," Ashley snapped. "God, Kimberly, how could you get so arrogant?" Arrogant, the exact word I had used. It was validating in the darkest possible way. The conversation continued, a masterclass in self-incrimination. "It was an accident," Kimberly wailed. "I thought I was texting you." Ashley's voice had no sympathy. "Well, congratulations. You played yourself. Is your name on anything?" "No," Kimberly whispered, the fight draining out of her. "I was supposed to handle that this week." "Then you're screwed," Ashley said flatly. "Better call Donald." Donald. That was a new name. I filed it away for later. Watching the footage, I felt a grim satisfaction. This was my proof. This was my undeniable truth. And I would need it, because Kimberly wasn't going to go quietly into the night. She tried to show up at my office a few days later, ready with a tearful performance about being homeless and heartbroken. Security politely escorted her out. Then came the inevitable social media campaign. Overnight, I was transformed into a monster. She posted long, rambling statuses about how I had, without warning, gone completely insane and thrown her out onto the street after 2 beautiful years together. Her friends, people I'd had over for dinner, rallied to her cause, flooding my inbox and comment sections with every name in the book. I was a narcissist, a monster, abusive. I let it sit for a day, watching her narrative take hold. Then, I did something a little petty. I logged on, and without a single word of commentary, I posted the 2 screenshots. The effect was instantaneous. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion. Half of her friends immediately went radio silent. The other half scrambled, trying to claim I'd taken it out of context, or that it was obviously just a dark joke. Because yes, all fiancés joke about systematically conning their partners out of their life savings. It's hilarious. The real fireworks started when her mother called me. I'd always liked Dorothy. She was a kind, genuine woman, and I felt a pang of guilt knowing I was about to shatter her world. "Andrew," "What is this I hear about you making my baby girl homeless?" she asked, her voice trembling with anger and confusion. I didn't argue. I just said, "Dorothy, I am so sorry you're in the middle of this. Let me send you something. Please just look at it." I texted her the screenshots. The silence on the phone was just like the one with my lawyer, only this one was filled with a mother's dawning horror. That doesn't sound like my Kimberly," she finally stammered. "I thought the same thing, Dorothy," I said gently. Then I asked, "She told me she quit her job to focus on wedding planning. Is that what she told you?" "Her job?" Dorothy sounded confused. "What are you talking about?" "She told me she was working at that marketing firm downtown. She said you wanted her to quit after the wedding, that you were old-fashioned about having a working wife." I couldn't help it. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Dorothy? She hasn't had that job for 8 months. I've been asking her to look for work for months. I even offered to help with her resume." Another long, heavy pause. The pieces were clicking into place for her, forming a picture of her daughter that she had never wanted to see. She had been lied to, manipulated, just as I had. Kimberly hadn't just built a false life with me. She'd built one with her own mother. I need to go," Dorothy whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Andrew, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She hung up the phone, and I was left feeling a strange mix of vindication and pity. My battle was with Kimberly, but her deception had casualties, and her own mother was one of them. I thought, naively, that this public humiliation would be the end of it. But I was about to find out that when a cornered animal has nothing left to lose, that's when they become the most dangerous. After the call with her mother, a heavy silence settled over my life for a few days. The social media attacks stopped. Her friends disappeared from my notifications. I foolishly allowed myself to hope that the shame and exposure had been enough, that she had finally slithered back into whatever hole she'd crawled out of. But I was learning that for people like Kimberly, shame isn't a deterrent. It's just an obstacle to navigate. Her next move wasn't one of quiet retreat, but of scorched earth revenge. It began with an email from our wedding venue. The subject line was innocuous: "Confirmation of your event changes." I almost deleted it, assuming it was an automated cancellation message. But I opened it, and my stomach dropped. "Hi, Mr. Peterson," it read. "We're confirming your request to change the date to next weekend and add the champagne fountain package. Your new balance is $47,000. Thanks." $47,000. She had not only moved the wedding date to just a few days away, but she had also added every conceivable upgrade and invited 200 additional guests. It was an act of pure financial terrorism. She knew she couldn't get my house, so she was going to try and bankrupt me with catering costs. I was on the phone with the venue in seconds. The coordinator was sympathetic but firm. "I understand, sir, but it's in your contract," she said. "We can't cancel or modify without both parties' consent." Kimberly still had access to the online portal, and legally, she was still my fiancée on paper. I took a deep breath and channeled my lawyer. "Okay, I understand your position," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "But what if my lawyer sends you a formal cease and desist, along with a notice of our intent to file a report for wire fraud if you process any further changes on her authority?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What kind of evidence do you have?" she asked, her voice suddenly much less certain. Within the hour, Paul sent them a lovely little package, a copy of the notice to quit, the text message screenshots, and a strongly worded letter that left no room for interpretation. 20 minutes later, their legal department called me directly. Turns out, Legitimate businesses don't like being implicated in criminal fraud cases. They canceled everything, refunded my entire deposit, and permanently banned her from the property. It was a victory, but a draining one. That night, exhausted, I fell asleep on the couch, only to be jolted awake at 11 p.m. by my phone ringing. The screen read, "Unknown number." Every instinct told me to ignore it, to let the silence hold. But something else, a deeper gut feeling, told me to pick it up. "Don't hang up," a voice said. It was Kimberly, but not the Kimberly I knew. The hysterical tears were gone. The fake sweetness was gone. This voice was calm, cold, and empty. "I'm hanging up," I said, my thumb already moving to end the call. "I'll make this worth your while," she said quickly. That stopped me. I hit the record button, just as Paul had advised me to do with any and all contact. "You have 10 seconds. "I know about your Bitcoin wallet," she said. My blood went cold. I'd mentioned it to her maybe once, in passing, a long time ago. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a significant amount of money I had from buying in early enough that losing it would hurt badly. "Remember Donald?" she continued, her voice chillingly casual. "He's good with computers. Really good." "Are you threatening me?" I asked, my own voice tight. She laughed, an actual, genuine laugh, completely devoid of humor. "Blackmail? No, Andrew, I'm negotiating," she said. "I'm offering you a clean break. Give me $50,000 and I disappear. You'll never hear from me again. No drama, no lawyers, no mess. Think of it as a severance package." She was trying to extort me and frame it as a business transaction. The sheer, magnificent audacity of it was almost impressive. But I was done being her mark. "Counter? Offer?" I said into the phone. "Go to hell." There was a beat of silence. Then, she said, "Your funeral," and hung up. The threat hung in the air, heavy and real. My hands were shaking again, but this time with rage and adrenaline. I immediately called Paul, then my bank, then the crypto exchange. I spent the next hour of my life locking everything down. New passwords, security questions, two-factor authentication on every single account I owned. The next morning, I woke up to a flurry of emails. 47 login attempt notifications from my crypto exchange. They'd actually tried it. Donald, her computer guru, had spent half the night trying to break into my accounts. But she'd made her final, fatal mistake. A messy breakup is a civil matter. Trying to extort someone is a crime. Attempting to hack into their financial accounts is a federal crime. And I had her on tape, explicitly threatening to do it. I drove to Paul's office, my heart hammering with a new kind of energy. I sat across from him, hit play on my phone, and let him listen to the entire 3-minute call. When it was over, he leaned back in his chair, and a slow grin spread across his face. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning. "Andrew, my friend," he said, practically giddy. "She just handed us a gift-wrapped felony charge." Filing the police report was an out-of-body experience. Handing over the recording of Kimberly's voice, the screenshots of her texts, and the logs of the hacking attempts felt like shedding a layer of skin. The cybercrime division was, as Paul had predicted, very interested. They told me that amateurs like Donald often get arrogant, leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs a mile wide. 2 weeks later, the police arrested him. And just as he'd been sloppy with his hacking, he was sloppy with his loyalty. He folded like a cheap suit in a rainstorm. He showed the detectives everything, a year's worth of texts and emails detailing Kimberly's scheme. I wasn't her first mark, just the one she'd pinned her biggest hopes on. But even that wasn't the craziest part. Remember how she'd lied about having a job, pretending to be planning our wedding? The business she was really running from her laptop was something I could never have imagined. She was coaching other women on how to do exactly what she'd done to me. She had a whole website, complete with glowing testimonials, for a course she sold for $499 called Securing Your Future, A Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom Through Strategic Relationships. I found this out because one of her former students reached out to me. Her name was Emily, and she'd seen all the drama on social media. She felt so guilty that she tracked me down and asked to meet for coffee. She was so convincing, Emily told me, stirring her latte with a shaky hand. She made it sound like female empowerment, you know? Like we were just evening the playing field because men had been doing it to women for centuries. With Emily's help, we found a cached version of the website and discovered a dozen other women who had taken Kimberly's course. It was a small-scale cult of personality, with Kimberly as the charismatic, manipulative leader. The solidarity was strangely comforting, but the story was about to take one last, mind-bending turn. Paul called me yesterday. "Andrew, you are not going to believe this," he said, and I could hear the strange mix of shock and dark amusement in his voice. "Kimberly's pregnant." I stopped breathing. My mind raced through the last few months. "What?" "No," I said. "That's impossible. We were always careful. Always." "Not yours, apparently," Paul said gently. "It's Donald's. She's about 11 weeks along." The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. 11 weeks ago was right when she started pushing, hard, about getting her name on the house deed. She wasn't just being greedy. She was on a deadline. She was already pregnant with another man's child and needed to lock down my assets before the truth came out. This news changed the entire legal landscape. Kimberly tried to use the pregnancy as leverage, claiming she couldn't possibly go to jail while carrying a child. But the prosecutor wanted Donald more. He was the one with a record, the one who committed the federal offense. So they offered Kimberly a plea deal: cooperate fully against Donald, shut down her business, and she'd get 2 years probation. I wasn't happy about how lenient it was, but Paul explained our other option. As part of the deal, to avoid a separate, costly civil trial for the extortion, her lawyer agreed to a settlement. She would have to pay me $50,000 for damages and emotional distress, and she had to return the engagement ring. She took the deal, and I got to see her in court as she admitted to everything. The peak moment of justice, the one I will replay in my head forever, was when the judge made her read aloud from her own website. She stood there, pregnant with her accomplice's child, and had to read her own grifting gospel to a silent courtroom, A Woman's Guide to Financial Freedom Through Strategic Relationships. You could see the last bit of her arrogant facade crumble and die with every word she was forced to speak. When it came time to list her assets for the settlement, it turned out she had over $70,000 saved up from her coaching business, plus another $15,000 from selling gifts I'd given her over the years. The judge ordered the settlement paid from those funds immediately, returned the ring to me, and fined her an additional $20,000. She looked at me across the courtroom then. For the first time, she didn't look angry or scheming. She just looked empty. Her mother was there, looking like she'd aged a decade in a month. Dorothy caught my eye and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," before taking her daughter by the arm and leading her away. The show was finally over. So that's where it all landed. Not with a bang, but with a quiet, hollow echo in a courtroom after a gavel falls. There was no dramatic reconciliation, no final, tearful confrontation. Just a bunch of broken people picking up the pieces and trying to figure out which ones still fit. It's been a few months now. Life is quieter. I hear that Kimberly is living with her mom, working a retail job at a department store. Her coaching website is gone, wiped from the internet by a court order. The settlement I won from her cleared out everything she had saved from her schemes. Donald got 7 years in federal prison. Turns out this wasn't his first time at the rodeo. Kimberly's baby will be starting elementary school by the time he gets out. As for me, I'm doing okay. I sold the engagement ring and donated all the money to a local women's shelter. It felt like the only way to cleanse it, to turn something that was born from a lie into something that could genuinely help someone. The house feels different now. It's no longer a crime scene. I replaced all the furniture she'd picked out and repainted the walls in colors that felt like my own. I even got a dog, a goofy golden retriever I named Paul. My lawyer thinks it's hilarious. But the trust, that's the part that's harder to repaint. My therapist says I need to learn to trust my own judgment again before I can trust someone else. And I know she's right, but it's lonely sometimes. I find myself replaying moments from our 2 years together, searching for a flicker of something real. Was every laugh, every "I love you" just a line from her script? I'll probably never know, and maybe that's for the best. But you know, the most unexpected thing came out of all this mess. That group of women who took Kimberly's course. We have a group chat. We call ourselves Kimberly's Survivors. It's been one of the most therapeutic parts of this whole ordeal, comparing her tactics and realizing none of us were uniquely stupid. We were all just targeted by a professional. It makes me wonder about the nature of these things. When someone shows you who they are, so blatantly, do you owe them your silence? I don't regret posting those screenshots. I know some people might see it as revenge, but I see it as a warning. People like her, they thrive in the dark. They count on their victims being too ashamed or too broken to speak up. Silence is the soil where these cons grow. And that's the question I want to leave with all of you. Where is the line between protecting yourself and enacting revenge? When the person you love reveals themselves to be a predator, what are the rules? Could you ever learn to trust again, or would you build walls so high no one could ever get in? And the biggest question of all, do you believe someone like Kimberly, who built her identity on deceit, is capable of ever truly changing? Maybe healing isn't about finding the answers, but learning to live peacefully with the questions. If this story made you feel understood, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to Cocoa Table Reddit. Every follow and comment gives me the motivation to keep sharing these real, emotional stories with you. And if you have a story of your own, feel free to share it in the comments. I'm always here to listen.